So on the bottom of Kuf Yud Amar Aleph, there are two dots. Kuf Yud Amar Aleph, right at the bottom. Yeah, two dots lines on the bottom. Yisayim Anu Shvach, no? This is talking about the rule that when someone dies, if he has debts, you can go to his Yisayimim and take from them the karka. Only karka is meshubed to the chayvus of the father. But what happened over here is this karka had improvements made to it. They got the landscape, but they put in sprinklers. There's various improvements that were made. So the question is, if the father had already made those improvements, so that's part of the karka that was meshubed to this debt. But if the assignment after the death of their father added those things are not meshubed like any metaltlin. It's not meshubed to the debt. So this is the argument. The assignments say we put in these improvements, and therefore you can't take it from us. And the Baal Chayv says no, your father did it, and therefore it is meshubed. Amila haviraya. Who has to prove it? So Rav Chanina lemeimer ara becheskes yasmi kaima. Baal Chayv lehaviraya. Right? He's coming to take away. The Baal Chayv is coming to take away from the assignment. So he has to prove the quantity of what he's trying to take. It's always you're the one who's trying to take away, so you have to bring the raya. He says the other way around. No, the Yisayim have to bring raya. My time, he says no, it's the other way around, because ultimately this karka is going to go to the Baal Chayv. The Baal Chayv is entitled to it, and then the question is, does he have to compensate the assignment for the extra improvements that were made? But he's entitled to get that karka without a doubt. So we're talking about the compensation. So the compensation, then you're really taking it away from the Baal Chayv. The Baal Chayv is the muhsik, because he's allowed to take the karka together with the improvements. The question is, do you have to pay them back for the improvements? So then he's the muhsik, and the assignment are the ones who are trying to take money away from him. Therefore, the assignment have to bring the raya. Amra Abaya, Avanan Nami Tinino. We have a Mishnah to prove this. Suffix Zek Kodem, the suffix Zek Kodem. This is talking about the din that one is not allowed to have trees within 50 amas of a city. I think it's because of beauty. It's supposed to be nice. You have to have like a little park area around the city. So you're not allowed to have trees there. But the question is, if the city was there first and then the person planted trees in his property within 50 amas of the city, and they cut it down, and it's too bad. You shouldn't have put it there. But if his trees were there first, and then the city came, then you have to compensate him for the trees when you cut them down. In either case, the trees got to come down. Not let it within 50 amas, but depending on which came first, that's who's going to have. That's going to depend on whether he gets compensated for cutting them down. So we say, "Dumb. You not cut it down, and you don't give money." I see raya v'shkoil. You say because it's a suffix, you don't pay, because he's the one who has to bring a raya, the person whose property it is. Since in either case it gets cut down, so we say that the question is whether he's going to be compensated. So once it's a question whether he's going to be compensated, then the raya is on him because he's the one who's coming to be mites. The same thing, like we said by the Yisayim. The same svar would apply over here when you have a question, an argument between the Baal Chayv and the Yisayim about who put the improvements in. If the Yisayim put it in, then they would get compensated. If the father put it in, then they wouldn't. So there we say, since the Yisayim are going to lose this karka in either case, and they just question whether they get compensated for having put improvements in, they're the ones who have to bring the right. What happens if Yisayim did bring a raya, and they were the ones who did improve it? So Rav Chanina wanted to say that when you kick them out, you pay them with part of the property. Meaning, let's say it was 10 acres of property, and the improvements are the value of 1 acre. You only give them you only give to the Baal Chayv 9 acres, and the other acres to pay for their improvements. but instead of giving them money. So the truth is, it's not like that. You give them money. But there are three examples where you evaluate how much improvement was made, and then it's compensated for by giving money. The pashut, when you make a division of a inheritance between the Bechar and the other brother. So Bechar, as we know, gets double. So let's say there was 3 acres of property. So the Bechar would get 2, and the Pashut, the other brother, would get 1. What happens if the property had been improved after the death of the father? So the improvements are not part of the inheritance. So those get split equally. So we say the way we'll do it is let's say the entire property was improved. The brother who's a Bechar, since he has 2 acres of property, and the other brother has 1 acre of property, because they're doing the proper division between a Bechar and a Pashut, he's going to also get 2/3 of the improvements. Right? The improvements were spread out equally over the property. But he's not entitled to 2/3 of the improvement. That came after the death of the father. He has no special entitlement after the death of the father. So he's going to have to give money to the other brother to make up for the fact that he got more of the improvements than he was entitled to. Which is our case, of Balchayv who's coming to take from Yisayimim Karka and there's improvements on it, or a woman whose husband died and the Yisayimim Yarshin, and she's coming to get a Ksuba. She's basically another type of Balchayv. We say we're going to make a Omdina, and we're going to give him money to compensate for the improvements. So we're seeing over here very clearly it's saying that you pay money for it, not that you give part of the property. And similarly, a Balchayv who comes and takes away from the Kuchas. Reuven had sold property, and then it turns out that Shimon was owed money to. Reuven sold his property to Levi, and then it turns out Shimon pops up and he says, Reuven has a pre-existing debt to me, so I'm going to take this property. But in the meantime, the Lekuchas had improved the property. So again, we're going to have the same din when this purchaser, when this Balchayv, when Shimon goes and takes the property from Levi, he's going to have to pay Levi for any improvements he made in the property from the time that he bought it until it's being repossessed by Reuven's Balchayv by Shimon. We're right in the middle of Kuf Yud Amud Beis. Amle Rabbeinu Ravashi. Remember this of a small Balchayv Lekuchas? Remember the Sava Shmuel Balchayv Lekuchas was the Aleph. Yov Shvacha? We're missing the words. Is it true that you give that when a Balchayv takes from Lekuchas, he has to pay for any improvements that the Lekech had made? Is that true? Does he really get the Shvach? Because again, what was the case over here? Reuven had, let's do it this way. Reuven lent money to Shimon. And then later on, he sold his property to Levi. I think that's the way I said it before. And now Shimon is coming to take the property from Levi. So, and in the meantime, Levi had improved the property. So the Gemara is saying that when Shimon takes the property from Levi, it's not his business to deal with the shvach. He just takes the whole thing. Levi normally has a din of achrayis. He can go back to Reuven, who was the person who originally sold it to him, and say, you have to compensate me for my property. I paid you money for this property. You have to pay me back for it. And not only do you have to pay me back for it, you also have to pay back for the shvach. So the Gemara is going to say that we're going to bring a raya that it's not the Balchayv, it's not Shimon's responsibility to deal with paying. It certainly doesn't have to pay for the property, he just takes it from Shimon. But he also, from Levi, but he also takes the property as is, and he doesn't have to compensate Levi. Any compensation will come from the guy who really screwed things up. It was really Reuben was the one who messed it up, because he's the one who owed money and then sold the property after he owed money. So that's what it says. That should be the Vama Shmuel Bal Chayv Gaivis Shvach. The Bal Chayv gets the Shvach and he doesn't have to pay it to it. Chitei Malay Kasha. And if you'll say no, it's even though we said over here that the Bal Chayv we make a umdana for the Bal Chayv doesn't have to pay for the Shvach, and over there we brought that Shmuel says you don't pay the Shvach. Is a mechila. Kam b'Shvach hamagil l'ksafim. That which we say that the Bal Chayv has to pay for the Shvach. Let's talk about where the improvements are. Let's say the improvements are he planted wheat, and the wheat is already at shoulder height. It's like almost ready to be harvested. So it's basically close to being separate from the karka, where the lekech would be able to cut it off and keep it for himself. So therefore you have to compensate it since it's almost like money. But if it's not at that point, normal shvach, it's the Bal Chayv, it's the original owner, Ruvain, the person who owes the money. He's the one who has to compensate the lekeach for losing his shvach. In fact, okay, you want to make a chiluk, but we know that it's not the way we paskin. We have Ma'aser Rav of Shmuel that he would allow the Bal Chayv to take from the lekech even fully grown shvach, even shvach that was ready to be harvested. Where it says no, the difference is like this. It depends. This Shimon who's going to take the property from the lekech, from Levi, how much does he owe Reuben? Let's say he owed Reuben $100, and the property is worth $100, and now Levi invested another $50, and now because of the investments, because of shvach, it's worth $150. So that Shimon doesn't have a right to take. He only has a right to take because he's a Bal Chayv, because he's owed money. But if the amount that he's owed is not equal to the amount of the shvach, then he doesn't have an entitlement to take it. But if he doesn't have the amount, then he gives the Gemara is saying, so what's going to happen? He's going to give money to the lekech, and he's going to take the whole land, and he's going to get rid of the lekech. He's going to say, listen, okay, so I have to pay you the amount of your shvach, since I'm not owed that amount. So therefore, I can't take it from you and say you have to go to the original person who owed the money. This is only good if you hold. This whole question is talking about where Reuven owed money to Shimon, and now Shimon is going to take away from Lekech Levi on the basis of that money that he was owed. What happens if when Shimon goes to Levi and says, okay, I'm taking the karka that you bought because your seller owes me money? What if Levi says to him, you know what, I'll pay the debt and I'll go get the money back from Reuven, but I want to hold on to my karka. I'm not interested in giving up my karka. I'd rather make a financial agreement with you. I'll pay you, and then I'll go back to Reuben. So if we say that Levi doesn't have that option, so then it makes sense what we're saying, that if there's not sufficient money in the loan, then the Bal Chayv, not the Bal Chayv, the creditor, the lender can't take away the amount of the shvach from the lekech. If you say that the lekech has the ability to pay off the creditor, the lender, and say, I'm not willing, I don't want to give up my karka, but namely, let's let him say, let Levi say, listen, I don't have money. If I had money, I could pay you off. But the shvach that you're saying you want to take from me, at least that much, since if I had money, I could pay it off. Let me take the amount of land that's equal to that, because that's what I put into it. So why are you taking that from me that I have to now go back to Reuven and try to get it back? Let me take part of the karka in return for that amount of money. Because if I had money, I could use it. So let me have the ara instead. So the Gemara says the reason why in this case the lekech doesn't have that option is because we're talking about it's not stam that it was karka, all the karka of the borrower is meshubah to the lender. We're talking about where the borrower had actually designated this particular piece of land. So anyone who buys it is a koil, and they know that it's meshubah for this debt. So therefore, even the shvach, he can't take away from him. The whole karka is meshubah to the loan, and the purchaser has no leg to stand on to say, I want to keep part of the land in return for my shvach. That's essentially the end of this discussion of a Kabbalah and Chayvus. Just one little part of the Mishnah, which the Gemara doesn't really talk about. So the Mishnah. If someone rented a land from his friend, he says, I'm buying it for one shavua echad. Shavua echad means a group of 7 years for 700 zuz. Hashviyas min haminyan. Since he says I'm buying it for shavua, which is a reference to 7 years, so shviyas is included. He's said 7 years. It means seven. It means this group of 7 years. But if he said specifically, I'm doing 7 years for 700 zuz, in other words, for 100 zuz per year, when he expresses it that he's doing it for 7 years as opposed to a unit of 7 years, then he means 7 years of working on it. And during the year of Shemitah, obviously, he can't work on it. So then it's included. He makes it like a Shvuah Echad means one group of years. It's a way of speaking of a unit of 7 years. So then the Shvius is included. But if he talks about them separately, then it's not. Okay, now moving on to another topic altogether, which we're talking about for a bit. This is the Indian. The Torah says both in, where is it? In Parshas Kodshim, Kadeshim Tiyu, it says, shouldn't hold back money from your friend. You shouldn't steal from him. What kind of zela and holding back? We're talking about you can't withhold wages from a worker. And there's a second parsha, which is a little bit longer in Parshas Kitzeitze, where it says, you shouldn't hold back the wages of a poor man or a Evian, a really poor man, from a guy that's living in your land. On his day, on the day you should pay the schar, the sun shouldn't set, the sun shouldn't rise on you, because he's an ani, who knows he's looking towards you, he'll call to Hashem and he'll have a chay. So these are the sugyas, the parshas of withholding wages. Zok the Mishnah. If someone's hired to work for the day, meaning from morning till night, so the boss has to pay him the whole night. If he's hired for the night, the whole day he can be goiva. If someone was hired for hours, so he's not paid working a whole day or a whole night, so goiva kol halayla b'chol hayom. He's goiva a whole night and a whole day. We'll see exactly what that means. Amachlokas doesn't mean he can, if he's by day, he has till the end of the day to get paid. If it's at night, he has till the night, or if it's saying he has a whole night and a whole day. Schir Shabbos, schir chodesh, schir shana, schir shvua. If he's hired to work for a week or a month or a year or for 7 years, yotza b'yayim, if he finishes and it's the middle of the day, goiva kol yayim, he has the whole day to be paid. Yotza b'layla, goiva kol layla v'chol hayom. He goes out at night, he gets paid. He has kol layla v'chol hayom, similar to what we said by Skir Shois. It's going to be the same, similar machlokes. Tanar Rabban. Where do we know that someone who's hired for the day, the boss has to pay him that night? You can't withhold the payment of a worker until the morning. It means so you have until the night. You can't do it past the morning. And how do we know that someone who's hired for the night, he has a whole day? You have to pay him that day. So maybe when it says you have to pay by Maybe that's talking about someone who's being paid, who's working by day, and it means as soon as he finishes working, you have to pay him that day. And someone who's during that day, and someone who's working at night, you have to pay him before the night is over. So tomorrow, says that's impossible because you only get paid when you finish the work. And if someone's hired for the whole day, you obviously can't pay him during that day because he doesn't finish work till the end of the day. So therefore, when the Torah says you have till the morning to pay, that must refer to someone who's working the whole day. And when it says you have all night to pay, so when it says you have a whole day to pay, that's talking about someone who finishes work at night, who works all night and finishes in the morning. So then there's no time to pay him at night, so you have to pay him the next day. So the Torah says lo sullen. Lo sullen means you can't leave open. Any adeh shat biker. So wouldn't I know just from the fact that it says sullen? I know it means until the morning. Mata malayma ad biker. Malam sheina over ella ad biker rishon bilvat. It's coming to tell you ad biker that he's only going to be chayiv for that first day. That means it's not a renewing chiyuv. It's not a renewing lav that every day that you don't pay, you get a new lav. It's just till the first day. That day comes. If you don't pay him that day, then you over the lav, and that's it. Become ve'elech mai. What happens from that point on? Amrav over mishum bal tisha. Now he's not over in a lav, but the chachamim are going to ding him. There's going to be a lav, the rabbanon dikachiyuv of bal tisha that you can't wait. Chamul misak and also it's going to be chayiv for that. Maybe they'll get maybe they'll give him some malchus, smardus. Rav Yosef, Mike Pro. Rashi says, Mike Pro, Hecha Ramiza Bal Tisha. Where is Asmachta for this Takanos Chachamim? Al Toimel Reyecha Lech V'Shoy V'Machar Etim V'Yeshitcha. The pasuk says in Mishlei, don't tell your friend, go back and come tomorrow, even though you have money today. Don't push off your work. Someone who said to his friend, go hire for me workers. Neither of them are over Bisham Baltolan. So the Gemara is really telling you in Eitzah how to get around this chi of Baltolan. If you get someone else to be a shliach, to hire workers, there's not going to be a chi of Baltolan on either of you. This one, the worker, the owner, the boss, he didn't hire them. He had someone else hire for them. And the other one is because he's not responsible to pay them. How could he have a chiyuv of withholding their wages if he's not paying them? If the shliach who goes to the Home Depot and hires the laborers, he says, come, I'm going to pay you to work for me today. He's a shliach, but he's taking upon himself to pay schar charalavhu. The whole reason why we said the shliach is not mechuyev on list balsalin, withholding wages, is because he's not the one who's mechuyev to pay. But if he says that he's going to pay, then he is mechuyev to pay. The Tanya, someone who hired a pile to work for him, he says, I'm going to pay you $10 to work for me today. And then instead of taking to his own house, he takes him to another person's house. And the worker works. In that case, the person who said, I'm going to pay you, even though the workers didn't end up working for him, he sent them somewhere else. But since he's the one who said, I'm going to pay you, he has to pay. And then he goes back to the balabayas, the person who they actually did the work for, and he tries to get paid back from the balabayas. If assuming that the balabayas in the end was happy with the work that they did, he needed to have the work done, he can go. It's a strange concept to us that you can go and hire someone. Just like we say, if you go and work for someone and he doesn't know about it, but if he benefits from it, he has to pay you. So this guy who took upon himself to hire workers and offered to pay them, he's going to have to pay the workers and then get compensated from the person that they actually worked for. So the same thing over here, the shliach, if he agreed to pay, he's mechuyev to pay. So why shouldn't he have a chiyuv of balsalin, of withholding wages? So we're talking about a case where he never said that. We're talking about the shliach said, the owner is going to pay you. So therefore he has no responsibility, and therefore neither of them have a chiyuv of balsal. Yehuda bar Marema Amalei l'Shamei. Yehuda bar Marema said to Shamish, Zil Agali Pailim. He would tell a shliach to hire Pailim to avoid the possibility of this deraisa. And you should tell them the schar is on the balabais, so you also shouldn't have the problem of balsalim. So he was using this trick to get out of the deraisa. Now, obviously, he was going to try to pay on time because he doesn't want to be mechayev on the derabanan baltisha. They would hire for each other. That was the way they avoided the deraisa. Amar Abba Rav Huna, Hani Shukoi de Surah, these market workers in Surah. They don't not over on Balsalin. Maybe Yadi, the Al-Yuma de Shuka Smichi. Because when they hire workers, everyone knows that they're not going to have money until the day of the marketplace happens. Every Monday and Thursday they gather in the marketplace. So if they hired a worker on Tuesday, he knows he's going to have to wait till Thursday to get paid. So as long as everyone knew at the beginning that the upmach is you don't get paid until the money comes in, then there's no chiyuv of Balsal. But they're still going to be over if they have money and they don't pay these workers, even though these workers were not expecting to get paid till the market day, they're going to be over under the rabban.
Even if that was the arrangement?
Well, it's an unspoken arrangement.
But if they specified this,
they specified what? That they should get paid?
You're going to get paid on Friday. Specified it on Tuesday.
Would it be over on Balsalin? Yeah, I would think so. Right. This the only reason why getting out of the Raisa is because their expectation is not to get paid, but if their expectation is to get paid,
you can circumvent the
you don't even have to make an arrangement to circumvent. If the expectation, even without an arrangement, is that you can get paid later. If it's like the minhag hamadina, is you get paid 2 days later, then there's no deraisa. Now, even if the place where there's a minhag hamadina, like the minhag over there, if they make an arrangement to pay that day, then the deraisa would be reinstated. On the other hand, if you have a worker, an employee, and you say, I pay bi-weekly, then obviously there's no deraisa because that's the agreement.
So
that's the scary part. This last thing says here, if he has money, but maybe it's only in this case where it's unstated. You say if it's unstated, that everyone understands that they don't get paid for 3 days. If you have money and you don't pay him, then you'd be over under the rabba. But maybe if you make up explicitly that you get paid bi-weekly, then there's not even a derabban. That would have to be the case because I don't know anyone who pays every day. It also could be the term of your employment is different, right? Well, here we're talking about daily workers. Maybe you have someone who's a permanent employee. You don't have to pay every day. You only have to pay when the term of employment is over. Or if you make up earlier, if you make up every 2 weeks, you don't even have to. You could say, I'll pay you at the end of the year. Right? So, because I think these are all talking about people who their employment ended.
Only if you have terms,
and the term ends. I mean,
those who hire someone for the day,
and so right. But if you hire someone indefinitely, I don't think there's a time that it comes that you have to, if you haven't made up anything, when they have to pay. I mean, you always make up when you hire someone when you're going to pay him. So that's you're going to pay him because you agree to that. But outside of that, you wouldn't have a din of vasal. Amarav, schir shows the yom goyva kol hayom. Schir shows the laila goyva kol hayom. He understands that Rav says, even though the Mishnah, we're going to see how this works with the Mishnah. He says someone who's hired for a few hours, so it doesn't end it doesn't go to the end of the day. And like we said, the reason why you don't pay on the same day that you work is because you don't pay until the work ends. So the work ends at the end of the day, so you have the whole night to pay. But if someone who's working part of the day, so whatever's left of the day, that's when he pays. And the same thing for someone who's hired to work at night. If you work during the day, you get paid that day. He gets the whole night and the whole day to pay, which just sounds like our mission. So that Gemara asks, our Mishnah said that if that is shchir shoyis, someone who works for part of the day, he gets paid the whole night and the whole day. To yufta the Rav, so l'chayr it's shver on Rav. Amalach Rav, let's start in Katani. No, shchir shoyis the yom goy b'kol hayom, shchir shoyis the layla goy b'kol. When the Mishnah said that a shchir shoyis gets paid for both the night and a day, it means that if he was a shchir shoyis by yom, he gets paid by day. If he's shchir shoyis by layla, he gets paid by layla. Not to mean that you get both of them together. You have both a night and a day to pay. In fact, what about the next part of the Mishnah? If he's hired for a long period of time, and if he leaves during the day, and now you can't say that that's what's starting Katani, because we already said Amalach Rav Tanoi. So you have to say it's Machlokas Tanoi. The Tanya. Schir shoyis the yom goy v'kol hayom. Schir shoyis the layla goy v'kol halayla. Different Rabbi Yehuda. This Rabbi Yehuda says like Rav. Rav Shimon Ayim schir shoyis the yom goy v'kol hayom. If someone works only during the day and he ends before the end of the day, the boss has till the end of the day to pay him. Schir shoyis the layla goy v'kol halayla v'kol hayom. But a schir shoyis the layla, he has the whole night and the whole day. This Tana is like the Tana of our Mishnah. Okay, before we start this, so, it makes sense if you think about it. If someone's working for part of the night and he finishes like at 4 a.m., it's hard on the owner that he has to pay in that hour. So we give him the next day to pay. We're going to learn that from Sukkim, but that's the sheet. Amru. Kol HaKoyvesh Schar Socher over Behei Shemus the essay halalu. You have to switch around these words. He's over on 4 lavin and 1 essay. Mishum baltosak ashreyacha. So this is from these psukim. So this first one is in the pasuk in Vayikra. L'sasak ashreyacha. You shouldn't hold back his pay. Or mishum bal tigzel, and it also says you shouldn't be geizel his pay. Or mishum baltosak schir ani. And this is from the other pasuk, which is in Dvarim, in Kiseitze, which says you shouldn't hold back the schir of a poor person. Or mishum baltalin. In addition, from the basic pasuk, that's what we call the whole lav. It's the pasuk says, those are the two psukim, the two lav we already mentioned, and then it says loisalin pulasachar. Or mishum biyum schare. Is also over for the other pasuk in Kiseitze, biyum schare. You should give his pay on that day. And he's also chayiv for you shouldn't allow the sun to rise on your chiyuv. Some of these, one of these, like we said before, that's talking about a schir laila, and that's talking about schir yom. So how could you say you have 5 lav, and if one is only for people who work at night and one is for people who work at day, you should only have 4. We're not saying that there's any one person can have all 5 of these lavin. We're saying how many lavin are associated with schiras, but they can't all apply to the same person. So what's considered to be Isaac? We said Leisasak and we said Leisigzel. What's the difference between them? If the boss says to him, I don't have money, come back tomorrow. And then he comes back tomorrow, he says, come back the next day. That's considered Isaac. If you keep pushing him off, is Isaac. But if the work owner says to him, I got the money, I'm not paying you. Just get out of my face. I'm just not doing it. He refuses to pay. That's Gezel. Maskal of Sheshus Ezu Isaac, Shechayvel of Tyra carbon. What is the considered Isaac when we say Loisasa? That he's going to be chayiv a carbon for it, to be cotton. It's similar to the sasak that we say by a cotton that you can't deny a cotton. If someone is washing a cotton, you can't deny paying it back. The kakafalem minor. That's where he's chayiv for mammon. So how could you say it's talking about where he says leich v'shoiv? He's not denying one. He's just saying he's pushing him off. He's saying come back another day. Of Sheshes nasatev loch zehu. Isaac is not where he says, come back, where he's just pushing him off. It's talking about where he says, I already paid you. But if he says, I'm refusing to pay you, that's a gezel. These are all, again, Isaac and Gezel are in this parsha of refusing to pay wages. We're not talking about the general din of Gezel. We're talking about the word Gezel that's used, Gabi, when the pasuk says you shouldn't lay sigzel pula sacher. Maskula avaya ezu Gezel shchayvel of Torah carbon. What is the Gezel? Before we said what was the asek that you chayv a carbon. Now we're saying what's the Gezel that you chayv on a Torah? Dumit v'kadon. Binan the kakafalei memayna, where he's been kai for a moment. But this person is not being kai for a moment. He's saying, I'm refusing to pay. He's not being kai for a moment. He's just saying, I owe the money. I'm just not willing to pay it. If he says, I never borrowed from you, I never hired you in the first place, that's Isaac. So they're both versions of where he says, I owe the money, but I either already paid it or I never owed it to you. But he's not saying, I owe you the money and I'm refusing. If Sheshus Maishna Oisik the Kashale or Maishna Gezel the like Kashale. If Sheshus had asked how could you say Oisik means come back another day? But we say that has to be a kfira. Why isn't he bothered by the other part that he said where he denies him? He says I refuse to pay. That's not. That should also has to be a kfira, and refusing to pay is not a kfira. It's just saying I'm not going to pay. Amalach Gezel the Gaz levahada kafre. When it says Gazel, it doesn't mean that he's saying I don't want to pay it at all. It's talking about where he originally said I refuse to pay, but then in the end he says, you know what, I don't even owe you the money at all. So that's how you have a kfir. So why doesn't he answer that same teretz like Gabi Eshek? Instead, he said that it's talking about, instead of Leich B'Shoiv, it's talking about where he said, I already gave it to you. By Gezel it says Oy Begezel, so that's mashma that at first he denied it, and now he's been gezel. At first he said I'm going to pay you, and then later on he says he's refusing. It says not with Isaac. That means that he already from the beginning he was refusing. Rava has the best teretz. He says it's all the same thing. It's just two. So you're going to be chayiv two separate lavin, but they're not referring to separate things. So this whole gemara of trying to say what Gezel refers to and Eshek refers to is all irrelevant. It's all the same issue. Okay, we'll stop over here.